Is it time for panic or patience? Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deeper in the corner. Waits for it. It's caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it, get it, touchdown, Knight again.
Schultz just before Brazil got him.
And the leaping interception by Woodson. Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown, Michigan. On its way. It's good. He's 5'7", 179 pounds. A junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris hacks a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number, and he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Robinson and Michigan.
Win it. We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue, welcome to this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. I am Steve Deace, and first and foremost, want to thank those of you that helped last week's episode be one of our most watched yet here on YouTube. Please continue to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Click like on this video, share this link, help us get the word out about what we're doing here to support and cover the Maize and Blue. And thank you as well to those of you subscribing on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Play too. Again, share those links. We put this out for free every single week, and we just do it because, like you, we love Michigan. We love the Maize and Blue. You can follow us on Twitter at Michigan Podcast. If you ever miss an episode of any of this or anything we do, everything is also archived at MichiganPodcast.com. And also, in the last month, we just started a page over at Patreon for those who are asking, hey, what can we do to support you guys other than share links? We really appreciate what you're doing. Well, we appreciate your appreciation via Patreon, and we do provide a couple of specific bonuses for those of you that are supporting us on our Patreon page each week. For example, you get our special, unique, exclusive instant reaction podcast that I do literally from my Maize and Blue man cave right after the Michigan game, after I've had a chance to collect my thoughts. That is for our supporters at Patreon, as well as my point spread picks for college football every week. So far this year, I'm 2-0, by the way, on Michigan games. I correctly had Michigan with the points over Florida, and I had the over, the total, in last week's Michigan-Cincinnati game. So, hey, if you want to get a good read on what the Wolverines are going to do this weekend, support us on Patreon and get access to our picks there each and every week as well. So we're going to have plenty of analysis. If I had a vote in the AP poll, where would I be and where would I rank Michigan? How about Big Ten power rankings, our Twitter question of the week, as well as our Twitter poll of the week? A lot still to come here on Michigan Podcast, but I want to begin with something the great John U. Bacon, just a tremendous Michigan man, Michigan fan, alum, New York Times bestselling author. He's been fond of saying this for years. Michigan fans aren't happy unless we're unhappy. And we've been unhappy for all the wrong reasons in recent years. It's been because the program just hasn't been good enough. Now we're back to being unhappy for the reasons we were when I was growing up and well into my 20s and 30s. It's because the team is good, we just expect it to be even better. I wore this sweatshirt today for this week's episode on purpose. Some of you may be wondering, bro, why are you wearing a Rose Bowl sweatshirt that's over 10 years old? You know, when I was a kid, I had this tradition, and it started with Jim's senior year in 1986, that when Michigan made the Rose Bowl, I always bought the sweatshirt, hat, program, etc. from that Rose Bowl game because it meant we were the Big Ten champs. The one year I didn't do it was in 06. We didn't win the Big Ten championship that year. Went to the Rose Bowl anyway. I was excited. I'm always excited to see us out in the Rose Bowl, but it kind of felt anticlimactic, you know, like we didn't really earn it because we didn't win the Big Ten. So I didn't buy that Rose Bowl sweatshirt. Plus I was thinking, you know, Mike Hart, Jake Long, Chad Henne, Mario Manningham, you know, all these guys are coming back. Adrian Arrington, we're going to be really good next year. And then Appalachian State happened, and, well, we know what the next decade was like, right? We lived through it. We endured it. So in my collection, because several of those other shirts, I wouldn't fit into them now, all right? But in my collection, this is the last one. That's a long time ago, man. And sadly, a galaxy that's not that far away. And because of that, because of how long ago this was, there's a lot of maize and blue angst right now. I listen to a lot of WTKA on mobile device from here in Des Moines since what was, frankly, a sluggish effort against Cincinnati. And you would think, listening to a lot of our fellow fans calling in to the local shows there on WTKA in Ann Arbor, you would think we were 0-2. We are 2-0 and in the top 10. So the question this week is, after what happened against Cincinnati, and that effort just isn't good enough. Let's say, in fact, let's stipulate that right now, okay? Because, and I said this on the Instant Reaction podcast on our Patreon page after the game. I waited about 45 minutes after the game to do that podcast, because if I would have given that podcast immediately after the game, it might have been a tad salty. I was not happy watching that game. So I took a deep breath. I'm getting older now. You know, I'm the ripe old age of 44, so I'm trying to learn life lessons for once now that I'm almost done raising kids. I probably should have learned 10 years ago. I decided, let's take a pause, take a few deep breaths, and then do the Instant Reaction podcast, because that effort on Saturday against Cincinnati, if we played 4 or 5 teams still to come on our schedule, we lose that game. And that's not good enough. We need to stipulate that from the outset. Way too sloppy. Unforced errors. You saw with a young team, one piece of negative momentum goes against them. And that's Donovan Peoples-Jones not communicating there on the punt return. It hits Benjamin St. Just, who's one of his upmen blocking upfield for him. Cincinnati recovers. I mean, the game starts out, it's 14-0. Michigan goes right down the field, hits a bomb to Kakoa Crawford, who makes a statement after a poor showing against Florida. 7-0 on the opening drive, pick 6 on the next drive. You're thinking, it's on like Donkey Kong, right? Force another 3 and out, make them punt. And then there's that turnover. And from that moment until early fourth quarter, the game was either stagnant or Cincinnati had the momentum. In fact, Cincinnati had 2 opportunities there to really force Michigan to pucker. Plays they didn't make downfield. One guy wide open, overthrown. Another guy on a perfect throw. Ball just went right through the basket there. So this is where the box score is a little misleading, because the box score looked the way we would like it to work. 200 yards rushing and passing almost again. I think it was 193 yards rushing, so pretty close. I mean, if you're running a pro-style attack in college, that's what you're looking for, 200 and 200. If you do that most weeks, you're going to win. Defense scored on 2 pick sixes after giving up 2 pick sixes on offense the previous week. It looked the way it was supposed to look in the box score for the most part. But if you watch that game, the box score didn't tell the whole story. In fact, Wilton Spate's performance statistically was really good. We would take 17 of 29 for 220 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. That's 60% completions, no interceptions. We would take that every game rest of the year. In fact, if you extrapolate, you prorate those stats for the rest of the season, he's all Big Ten, guys. That's 23 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and those both came in the first game of the year. I mean, that's first or second team all Big Ten, those kinds of numbers. We would take those numbers. But he also didn't play well. At times we needed him to. Couple overthrows on guys, again, that were wide open. Not necessary. Inexcusable. Those are plays we've got to make against Sparty, Wisconsin, Penn State, Ohio State. Hell, we might have to make those plays against Purdue in the next couple of weeks, given the way they're playing right now. A couple of botched handoffs. One on an exchange with Kakoa Crawford on the end around on the jet sweep. Another, he just dropped on a play action. Cost us a touchdown. And so the angst level right now, to some degree, within Maize and Blue Nation, is high. And it's high for two reasons. Wilton Speight has to be more consistent. And this, right here. In fact, in this Rose Bowl, we didn't even win the Big Ten championship outright. We shared it with Iowa. When we lost to Ohio State last week of the year, Iowa beat Wisconsin. We shared it with them, but went to the Rose Bowl because we beat them head-to-head early in the season. So because it's been this long since we've got to really earn one of these by winning the Big Ten, angst is higher. So I'm not here to tell people who are on tilt right now to relax. I'm not. But this last basketball season, I learned a very important lesson. When you have a coach with a good track record, wait until the season is over before you melt down. Now, I happen to think fans who don't melt down when their coaches don't have good track records aren't helping their team at all. In fact, they're enabling poor performances. But on the other side of the coin, when you have a coach with a track record and you melt down too soon, you're contributing to negativity in the fan base. Back in January, after the rough start to the Big Ten season in college basketball, I went on Go Blue Wolverine, the Michigan Insider. I went on there and said, I think we're going to have to make a basketball coaching change. I don't think the team's good enough. You know, we didn't go to the NCAAs 2 years ago. Last year, we were a partial qualifier, if you will. We had to play our way in. We're not making the NCAA tournament this year. Beeline's had a great run. It may be time to move on. I even went so far as to say, if this team makes the NCAA tournament, I'll take a pie to the face. That's how confident I was in the dead of January. They weren't going to make the NCAA tournament. And there I was here in the cafeteria at my office, end of March, on Facebook with my kids, putting a pie in my face because I was wrong. This team rebounded. This basketball team rebounded to end up having one of the most enjoyable, significant, memorable basketball seasons Michigan's had since the '89 national championship team. Well, we're never going to forget that 4-day run at the Big Ten tournament after the near tragedy. How close they came to making the Elite Eight. The tremendous win over Louisville in the round of 32. It was a great season. Big Ten tournament champions. They're going to hang a banner when they start the season back up here in November. I should have had more faith in John Beilein, given his track record. That doesn't mean I wasn't right to be critical of where the team was at that time. That doesn't mean I wasn't right as a Michigan fan to think, you know, we got to do better than back-to-back years of not making the NCAA tournament, and then the next year we make it as a play-in. That Michigan just has to be better than that. That's okay. We're Michigan. You're going to sing a song about being the leaders and best. That comes with some expectations. But I took it too far when I hit the Chernobyl button and went 3 Mile Island. I learned a very valuable lesson at the ripe old age of 44. Maybe I should have learned 10 or 20 years ago, but, you know, we all adult at our own pace nowadays, fellow snowflakes, so it took me a while to get there. So what I would say to folks right now that are questioning Harbaugh's decision about playing Wilton Speight, do you understand you are questioning arguably the best quarterback coach on planet Earth? You are saying someone with a track record of taking guys who are at non-scholarship San Diego and letting them make a paycheck and a living in the NFL, taking a cast-off at Iowa that they didn't want, who's now making good money playing in the NFL, who took a guy that was a pretty good recruit, but he wasn't, you know, a top 50, you know, USA Today All-American Andrew Luck, and turning him into the number 1 pick in the NFL draft? You understand that you are saying the guy who made the ballsiest call in modern NFL history, sitting Alex Smith as a playoff team, as a starting quarterback, to go with the unknown in Colin Kaepernick, which also required revamping his offense. You understand, you are saying you know more about this position than that guy does. Okay? Now, I'm high-strung. I'm emotional. I'm like you. All right? That's why I wanted to put it that way, because when we put it that way, it kind of sounds a little silly. Well, because it is. But that doesn't mean there isn't cause for concern. The youth on this team, I think, is actually more felt on offense. Even though the defense is technically replacing more starters, a lot of those guys played very significant minutes. And defense is much more about pure athletic ability and reaction than offense. It's more about execution and precision. A lot of these guys on offense last year played a lot too, but they didn't really play key roles. Kekoa Crawford was a reserve player. We knew what play we were running whenever Eddie McDoom came in the game, and he's barely even playing right now. Khalid Hill was a key contributor last year at fullback. Wilton Spate was a key contributor last year at quarterback, third-team All-Big Ten. Mason Cole and Ben Bredesen, key contributors last year on the offensive line, but I don't really count Mason Cole because he's actually playing a different position than he played last year. Last year he was a center. This year he's a left tackle. So you have Bredesen at left guard, Spate, and Khalid Hill. Those are the only 3 guys playing key roles on last year's team in the same spots they were in last year for this year's team. It's going to take time. So I'm not saying not to be concerned. I am saying, though, given the track record of our coach, don't make the mistake I made. Don't make a clown out of yourself. Don't be sitting on your Facebook wall taking a pie in the face from your kids because you did an adult today, all right? Jim's earned our patience. Spate has played very well at times. Did I mention again he was third-team All-Big Ten? Let the season play out. This is why I thought the Florida game was so key, because I'm not surprised to see how sloppy it is on offense. That's where you're going to feel the new guys much more than on the defense. You get to fly around, react, hit. Offense, again, precision, execution. That's going to take some time. Go back to when we had a bunch of experienced guys in Jim's first year and Jake Rudock's few games at quarterback. Those did not look like the last few games at quarterback, did they? No. And it's not like at Michigan we don't have a history of guys we gave up on that ended up becoming really good players. Demetrius Brown, remember him? 7 interceptions in one game against Michigan State. He got set aside from Michael Taylor. Michael Taylor gets hurt, breaks his collarbone. Bo's got to go back to Demetrius Brown. He ends up being only the second quarterback in Bo's tenure to win him a Rose Bowl. I think of, in more recent times, Jeremy Gallen. Jeremy Gallen was the guy when he went back to return punts on a Rich Rod. We did one of these numbers. In fact, we turned the channel because we knew it was going to be bad. He ended up being one of the best players for Brady Hoke. Totally reinvented himself. We've seen this time and time again. Wilton Spate's a good example of this. Wilton Spate was that guy on that HBO profile of Harbaugh when he first took over, learning Jim's entire vocabulary. It almost looked like Jim was trying to run him out of Ann Arbor, like he didn't think he was going to be any good. We saw him go on and be third-team All-Big Ten last year. When you're dealing with players of this age, they are not finished products. That's why we have this phrase, trust the coaches. I should have trusted John Beilein, a guy that's now, I believe, placed 8 guys in the NBA, none of whom were McDonald's All-Americans. I should have trusted him, and for that, I deserved the pie in the face. Literally. Some of you, for not trusting Harbaugh, deserve the proverbial metaphorical pie in the face. That doesn't mean we don't have concerns. I don't understand the offensive play calling at times. At times, it seems too conservative to me. I pointed that out against Florida, throwing the ball or running the ball on first down too much. Jim's not infallible. He's a human being. But he does have a track record of success. Let's let this play out. That's why I wanted to beat Florida. Get through that game, no matter by hook or by crook. Win that one, and now you're in the top 10 while you're essentially reloading on the fly. You know who else would like to be in the top 10 and reloading on the fly right now? Every other team in college football not currently ranked in the top 10. That's over 90% of the teams, guys. Because the next few weeks, not saying, and what did I tell you in the preseason? We're not going to blow all those teams out, all right? But these are games we're going to win because we're athletically better. They might be ugly, but they give us a chance to build confidence. But get past that Florida game, and now you get up there in the top 10 of the rankings. You build yourself a little margin for error with the voters and with the College Football Playoff Committee in terms of your perception, and you win these games against Cincinnati and against Air Force and against Michigan State and against Purdue. They may be ugly, but you will build now a resume, get some guys some reps. So let's let the season play out. Jim is 2 wins away from having the best 30-game record at Michigan in the last 50 years by any guy not named Bo Schembechler. Okay, that's pretty good. He's got a track record. He was 1 play away from winning a Super Bowl. If he went back to the NFL tomorrow, he'd have one of the top 5 all-time winning percentages of NFL coaches. So it's okay to be concerned. But the angst, a little patience, all right? As the great prophet Aaron Rodgers once said, relax.
Crossing route, and he's got his receiver. Spate goes straight back, throwing deep. Crawford in the end zone. Touchdown, Michigan. Moore's getting pressured. He's going down. Devin Bush. Moore back to throw. Here's pressure. He throws deep down the middle. It's overthrown and picked off. Pick 6, Michigan. Tyree Kittle. Peoples-Jones in motion. He gives it to Peoples-Jones on the jet sweep. He's at the 50, the 40, the 30. Gets a great block downfield. The give to Evans. Tries right guard. Bounces it wide right. Looks like he's got room. To the 10. Inside the 5 to the 4-yard line. 28-yard attempt by Nordine. Snap's good. Spot's good. The kick is up. The kick's good. On the shotgun. Looking right. He's going to get hit. Go down. Back to throw, got time. Now avoids the rush, throws over the middle, and it's caught for a first down at the 30-yard line. They get the snap off. Back to throw, big pressure coming, sacked at the 15-yard line. Spade from the shotgun, gets the snap, looking over the middle. He's got Gentry, the tight end, and he's up over midfield. Spade in the shotgun, straight back to throw, got time, throws over the middle. Caught by Perry, the 20, the 10, the 5, dives, scores! Grant Perry is picked up. Moore is now going to be forced to run with it. He will be sacked. Winovich and Gary were right there. Gets the snap. Looking left, and he throws under pressure, and he's hit. Rashawn Gary again.
Oh, he just leveled the quarterback.
Pitch sweep left to Isaac. He's got the corner. He's at the 20. He's at midfield in the shotgun. Looks, throws. He's got his man Crawford inside the 15 to extend Michigan's lead to 13. Snap is good. Nardine drills it through. Good from James.
Whoa!
No, high snap over the head of the kicker, and he bats it back out of the end zone, and that'll be a safety for Michigan. Moore, the quarterback, rolls right, throws, and it's intercepted at the 10, the 5, the right pylon. He's in. Touchdown, Michigan. The Wolverines will win their home opener of 2017. Jim Harbaugh goes to 3-0 in his home openers.
Hey, Steve Deace here from Michigan Podcast. If you are looking to put the ball in your court, your actual court, Sport Court of Michigan has you covered from basketball to tennis to batting cages to hoops. If you need anything athletic in your backyard, give them a call. Based out of Michigan and ready to install your court sooner than you expect. In fact, if you're in the Southeast Michigan area or Ann Arbor, Tim Barnes will personally walk you through the process of having your dreams of a professional court in your backyard. Just visit Sport Court MI for Michigan, sportcourtmi.com. Now, if you're outside of Southeast Michigan, anywhere in the country, and you need a hoop for your driveway or yard, they've got you covered there as well at monsterhoops.com. Monsterhoops.com. They will ship it right there to your door. Now, mention the Michigan Podcast at monsterhoops.com. You're going to save $100 on a Monster Hoop. If you mention Michigan Podcast at sportcourtmi.com, you could save up to $1,000. That's right, up to $1,000 on your backyard game court at sportcourtmi.com, depending on the package you select. Either way, whether it's sportcourtmi.com or monsterhoops.com, tell them Michigan Podcast sent you. All right, back here on Michigan Podcast, and we have a new guest with us here this week. Vito Churko is here with us. Maybe you've heard us mentioning our new partners at Detroit Sports Podcast who are helping to get the word out about the work we're doing here at Michigan Podcast. We wanted to talk a little bit about that, but also get the folks over at Detroit Sports Podcast take on what happened on Saturday and all the angst we're seeing amongst Michigan fans, despite the fact the team is 2-0 in the top 10, averaging 34 points a game, and is averaging over 200 yards rushing and passing in the same game on offense. So, Vito, it's good to have you with us here on Michigan Podcast. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
So let's start out. First of all, tell our audience, if they've not heard of you guys before, who's Detroit Sports Podcast? What do you guys do over there?
So we were established in late 2013. We have 7 to 8 weekly podcasts as part of the Detroit Sports Podcast Network right now, including my two of mine that I do weekly, Tigers Talk, all about the Detroit Tigers and Major League Baseball. Two Bad Hombres, it's a pop culture one. Really anything goes with the sports takes that we have. Doc and I, John Charles Macaroon, the co-CEO and founder, along with Adam Strozinski, and they co-host Doc and Jock, which comes out every single Thursday. So, I mean, we do a lot of just unfiltered, uncensored sports talk, no FCC regulations. We love it, and we have a lot of fun, too.
This is really growing. Major syndicators now, like Westwood One and others, are getting into syndicating podcasting with some big names, including our very own coach, Jim Harbaugh. And I think that's just because a lot of people have just decided, Vito, they want to listen to what they want to listen to when they want to listen to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's about people's interests and what they do want to listen to. With the FM and AM radio stations and their shows, you can't control the content, right? You can control what you want to listen to through a podcast platform. So you download the podcast that you want to listen to. You get a daily maybe version of the podcast that you like, or a weekly version, as we do. And we do special editions too, sit-downs, one-on-one interviews with big names in the sports field, media personalities, and current and former athletes. And I think people that want to tune into that will, and they can get that through the podcast outlet.
In fact, we recently, right before the season started, we had Jim Branstetter, the voice of the Wolverines, here on Michigan Podcast, and we have you guys at Detroit Sports Podcast to thank for it. You guys were actually the ones that connected us.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, for saying that, and we appreciate all the compliments and everything. And yeah, no problem. Anytime.
All right, so let's get into Michigan fans right now. I opened up the show here this week, pointing out the line from the great John Bacon, who has said for years, Michigan fans aren't happy unless they're unhappy. Now, for too often in recent years, the unhappiness has been from the premise of the team's just not that good. Most of my time as a kid and a young adult, the premise was, well, we're 9-3, we should have been 10-2. We're 10-2, we should have been 11-1, right? It's the unhappiness is we should be better than we even are as the winningest program of all time. So I have laid out the case why I think there are some concerns, but given Coach Harbaugh's track record, have some patience. I went back, Vito, and talked about during the basketball season in January, I was on the Michigan Insider Board saying it's time for a coaching change. I don't think this program's going anywhere. We're coming off 2 years ago. We didn't make the tournament. Last year we did as a play-in team. This team has no chance to make the tournament. If they do, I'll take a pie to the face. Well, at the end of the year, my kids were on Facebook Live giving me pies to the face because I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I should have trusted John Beilein's track record. So that's kind of my message right now, is to have concerns, but trust Jim Harbaugh's track record. What say you, Vito?
Well, yeah, I mean, what Harbaugh did at Stanford, what he has done as an NFL head man with the San Francisco 49ers, getting to the Super Bowl, coaches up quarterbacks, makes a lot of quarterbacks look good. And you know what? I know there's question marks about his offensive style and whether or not maybe he's capable enough of coaching up the X's and O's, even offensively. But you know what? I think you got to trust the process, trust what he's built up, and trust that he can coach up his players now with a lot of his talent assembled, and that he can do something with it and have a very productive campaign and tenure in Ann Arbor.
Let's talk about Wilton Speight. A lot of people forget he was third-team All-Big Ten last year. You go to his first year as starter, phenomenal the first 9 games. We get to the Iowa game. He did not play well, but he also delivered 2 pinpoint passes, one for a touchdown and one for a first down, that if their senior receivers who are now getting paid in the NFL had held on to, they would have won that game. The Ohio State game, let's face it, he shouldn't have played. He was injured, but he was their best chance to win. He came back and played earlier than he should have. So I give him points for being valiant given those conditions, even though he didn't play great, but he still threw that clutch pass there in overtime on 4th and goal with the game on the line. The Florida State game, I actually thought he played really well in that game. Brought Michigan back after their offensive line was playing ole with the Seminoles defensive front in the first half. He was literally on 1 Mississippi snap counts having to throw the ball because they weren't blocking at all. So I don't think he's impervious to criticism, but this idea this guy sucks, he's a bonehead, I think this is way out of whack. I do think this, though, and I think this is where the legitimate criticism comes in. Given the youth and inexperience on offense, we need him. I think if we're going to win a Big Ten championship, he can't just be a game manager this year. He's got to be capable of being a difference maker. And that is still yet where I don't know that that's who he is. That we may have reached his ceiling, which is he's still pretty good, but I don't know that that will be good enough with the youth on the offense this year. He's got to be more than a game manager in my mind, Vito.
I don't know, Steve, if he can be that game breaker. I agree with you because I saw against Cincy last week where he missed guys, overthrew them. And I know a lot is on his shoulders for the offense, the offensive sake, and the offensive flow and schemes they run at U of M right now. I mean, he's the man. He's got to make some big throws. But he's got to deal with the pressure. I think he did all right last year, but he's got to elevate his game now. He's got to become more of that game-breaking quarterback, a guy that can break open the game with his arm, with the long throws, and to be able to complete them accurately, be effective with the long passing game. If he shows that more and more, I think U of M fans will start to support him even more because a lot of fans right now, as you said, Steve, as you know and as your fan base knows, are just doubting him severely. And whether or not he can break open a game with his arm, elevate the passing game and the rest of the offense, because I know there is a ton of pressure on him to get it done as a QB of this team, which has a lot of expectations once again under Harbaugh. But I think he has to start proving it, too, if he wants the U of M faithful to completely get behind him like his teammates have, because the report, everything has said that the fans don't support him, but his teammates do. So, at least he has the locker room support. But now, I guess the next step for him is to get the fan support, and he's got to be better than what he has so far this season. Even last year, like you noted, Steve, and you look at his QBR, a stat that ESPN utilizes for breaking down and evaluating quarterbacks. It's below 40 for the raw QBR and the adjusted QBR. And that's not good enough to get it done at the Big Ten level and when you want to be a national power and a team that makes the Final Four this season.
All that is right on the money, and this is why when I hear that information, though, Vito, this is why, and we're talking to Vito Churko from Detroit Sports Podcast here on Michigan Podcast, the reason why I preach patience is, as you were talking for our YouTube viewers, we were running some B-roll of Michigan highlights against Cincinnati, okay? And here's who he threw the ball to. Gentry, who came to school as a quarterback, who wasn't on the active roster last year. He was a redshirt. Kakoa Crawford, who was a bit player at best last year. Grant Perry, who missed the last third of the season because of suspension for his antics after the Michigan State game in East Lansing last year. Ty Isaac, who was the 3rd or 4th string tailback at times last year. I could go on and on. Even the offensive line, one guy's playing the same spot he started in last year in Ben Bredesen. Mason Cole has moved from center to left tackle. He doesn't have the cohesion, and that's why they don't have the precision. That's why I think we should wait. Give it a few more weeks. It's why I thought the Florida game was so important, because if you could find a way to sneak out of that one with a win, then you had 4 or 5 weeks in a row, games where you're going to be double-digit favorites, not saying you'll dominate them all, but games that you'll probably just win on athletic ability alone, which gives you essentially extra reps to get with those guys and get more of your chemistry down and more of your timing down. And that's why I think it's week 2 with an almost entirely new offense. Folks just need to be a little bit more patient.
Relax, RELAX, right? Aaron Rodgers.
Yes, I just quoted that a few minutes ago, in fact, yes.
I think U of M fans have to do that, but you know what? They're always unhappy, right? John Bacon said, we know that about the U of M faithful in Ann Arbor. They're always doubting these players and very critical of them no matter what they're doing on the playing field. So, just the bottom line is that Wilton Speight has to be more successful as a game-breaking quarterback that can throw the deep and accurate pass. But you're right, Steve. It's about the limited options, maybe, and maybe not limited is the best word to use to describe it and what he's dealing with, but guys that are inexperienced, right, are raw. Like Kakoa Crawford, as you noted, wasn't a major piece of the offense last year. Donovan Peoples-Jones being worked into it and fielding punts not looking the best against Cincy. Grant Perry's your number one option. I think your best wide receiver right now. That might be a problem when Grant Perry's your number one guy, and he looked really good against Cincy a few times and catching some balls and scoring that touchdown. But I don't know if you can trust him being your number one all season long, and maybe it's just about that cohesion, though, gaining that chemistry between Speight and his wide receivers.
You know, the plight of Wilton Speight reminds me a lot. You know, I wore this sweatshirt I said at the top of the show because when I was younger, I used to collect. Every year we won the Big Ten and went to the Rose Bowl, I would always buy the official sweatshirt. Well, I didn't buy one in the 06 season when we went because I didn't feel like it was legit because we didn't win the Big Ten that year. We lost that 1-2 game to Ohio State. So the last one I have is this one from the 04 team that shared the title with Iowa in Chad Henne's freshman year. Well, the last time we won it outright was in 03. And this reminds me a lot of John Navarre. Now, I don't think Wilton Speight and John Navarre are the same player at all because they're both tall and white. They get compared, but Wilton Speight athletically has a lot more mobility and escapability than John Navarre did. But if you look at the plight of Navarre, he was a guy, and this was really the dawn of the sports talk radio, internet age. We had not yet come into social media, but he was, back in those days, the bane of every Michigan fan's existence. When we'd put on the white uniforms and go on the road, I'd pull my hair out. I used to call him John Bizarre. He would just make throws and make plays in road settings. He did not make it home. And it really wasn't until the very end of his career, even his senior year. You know, we went on the road to Oregon after shutting out Notre Dame 38-0. We didn't show up for 3 quarters out there. He laid an egg. We lost a game at Iowa. We had a 2-touchdown lead that year. Minnesota, we had to have the greatest comeback in school history to win that game against an decent but not great Minnesota team. Even that senior year when he beat Ohio State and he won the Big Ten championship, even up until the end, a lot of Michigan fans were like, this guy's not that good. And look at the players he had around him, by the way, on that team. Chris Perry won the Doak Walker Award that year. You had Braylon Edwards. He won the Biletnikoff Award the next year. You can make a case statistically Braylon Edwards is the best wide receiver in the history of the Big Ten Conference. The other 2 wide receivers were guys who started and played in the NFL for years. Jason Avant, Steve Breston. At least there were David Boss, Tony Pape started on the offensive line. Those guys played in the NFL. John Navarre struggled to get consistency surrounded by juniors and seniors who were pros and All-Americans, let alone what Wilton Speight is trying to establish a connection with. We were patient with Navarre. That ended up with a win over Ohio State and a Big Ten championship, and that's why I'm bringing that perspective here when it comes to Wilton Speight, Vito.
Well, it's about wins at the end of the day, right? As a quarterback,
exactly.
You're judged based on your wins. And Speight has won more games than he's lost so far in his career. And he has inferior, less caliber weapons to work with than John Navarre. As you mentioned, all those big names that he had to work with. And I think the thing that might help out U of M all year long is their ground game. I like their options, including Ty Isaac, who had a great game last week. Perhaps he's their number one guy. I know they mix and match guys, including Chris Evans there with the ground game. And I think the O-line, I think it'll become more cohesive, keeping Wilton Speight upright, and that'll make him his most effective. With a good ground game and good O-line protection to keep him upright, I think you'll see the best Wilton Speight that you possibly can. But guess what? The U of M critics out there about Speight will not go away, and they look at Shane Morris and what he just did, winning, what was it, the MAC West Offensive Player of the Week, throwing for 400-plus yards.
I know, it's odd. They don't look at Shane Morris's success last week and think that just adds to Jim Harbaugh's track record. They think this guy really doesn't know what he's talking about. They take the exact opposite viewpoint there. So, Vito, how can our audience follow you guys and listen in at what you do at Detroit Sports Podcast?
Well, our website is DetroitSportsPodcast.com. We're on Twitter at Detroit Podcast. I myself am on Twitter at Vito Jerome. So follow us for that daily content. Once again, 7 to 8 weekly podcasts, and a lot of special editions of the podcast as well are featured through our podcast platform at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Thank you, Vito, and thanks to you guys at Detroit Sports Podcast for helping us get the word out here about Michigan podcasts. We appreciate it. Go Blue.
Hey, go Blue. Thank you.
All right, back with more here in just a few. And now we'll look around the Big Ten with our Week 2 Big Ten power ratings. Let's start with Rutgers at the bottom. And thanks to Rutgers. I tried to give you some love last week, Scarlet Knights. I tried. When I used to cover Iowa State, Chris Ash was our defensive backs coach at Iowa State back in those days. Great guy, one of my favorite Iowa State assistants. I really want him to be successful at Rutgers, man, but you can't give Eastern Michigan its first Big Ten win ever. You just can't. You've got to follow up the perceived momentum that you had from playing Washington tougher than expected by winning this game at home. You look at Purdue, we're going to talk about them in a second. I said their allegedly close loss to Louisville was kind of fool's gold. Louisville had over 600 yards and dropped the ball on the 1-yard line twice. But Purdue took that perceived momentum and capitalized on it. Rutgers took that perceived momentum and looked at their jerseys and said, yeah, it still says Rutgers. You can't lose to Eastern Michigan, Chris. You can't. You can't break Eastern Michigan's Big Ten maiden. You just can't do that. Number 13, Nebraska. Right now, the black shirts, man, they're more like no shirts, no shoes, no defense. What is that? I mean, what is that? Seriously, that's embarrassing. We picked the wrong time to bring them into the league. We're 10 years too late on that one. That's just, they're dragging the league down now. That's just terrible. Terrible. And I'd like to say, the game at the end against Oregon was 42-35. I'd like to say it got close because Nebraska came back. Not really. They barely had over 100 yards rushing for the game. Tanner Lee was less than 50% completions. They didn't storm back. Oregon just went into halftime, and they were like, this one's over. It's over. It's kind of put it in cruise, popped that clutch in, and just coasted the rest of the way. And Nebraska got some garbage points. There wasn't some furious rally, some furious comeback. Oregon just knew the game was over. It's embarrassing. Nebraska retire the black shirts. What Nebraska needs to do with the black shirts is what Ohio State does with the gold pants. Where you earn those gold pants if you beat Michigan. The black shirt should be awarded at the end of the year on that defense if you earned it. But just handing it out at the start of the year, man, it's like a participatory trophy. It's a joke. Next, in our Big Ten power ratings, Northwestern. Just a brutal performance, man. Duke got 4 times the yardage against Northwestern. 538 to 157 Northwestern. You arguably have the best quarterback running back tandem in school history, and you get 157 yards of offense against Duke. Even when they're good, you don't get 157 yards of offense against Duke. You might do that against Florida State or Clemson in the ACC, but against Duke? This is not one of those typical stub your toe early Pat Fitzgerald games. This one, I'd be very worried, man. I'd be having some late nights there in Evanston, Illinois after that performance. Number 12 in our Big Ten power ratings, Illinois. The only other team, here's a stat for you. I looked it up. Because Western Kentucky, going back for several coaches now, has been an offensive juggernaut. So I just went back and looked at the last 30 games to see the last time someone held Western Kentucky to 10 points or less, like Illinois did on Saturday. You know who it was? Team from Tuscaloosa named Alabama. You heard of them? That's a yo. Now, listen, man, I'm not saying, let's make Pasadena reservations for the Illini, but, maybe we make a little Pizza, Little Caesars reservations after a performance like that. Maybe they're a little better than we thought. That was an impressive performance by Illinois for Illinois standards. Number 10, I've got Purdue. Boilermakers crushed Ohio, which was the preseason pick to win their division in the MAC. That was their most dominant win over an FBS opponent probably since 2012, which was the last year they made a bowl game, by the way. That's probably not a coincidence. Number 9 in our Big Ten power ratings, Minnesota. Not often you see Big Ten teams go out and win that road night game on the West Coast. They don't do that very often, and I know Oregon State's not that good, but, Big Ten teams just don't win that game very often. And Minnesota not only did, but they put it to them. They put the boot to the throat, so congrats to P.J. Fleck there. Number 8, Indiana. Not really sure what they're doing with the quarterback position there. Freshman quarterback Peyton Ramsey comes off the bench, leads the Hoosiers to their first win at Virginia. Richard Lego's like, dude, I went from throwing for 400 against Ohio State to benched against Virginia. What's up with that? Tom Allen, I hope he knows what he's doing there with that offense. Number 7 in my Big Ten power ratings this week, Michigan State. Sparty's already 1 win away from matching last season's win total, guys. That's a yo. When you're trying to rebuild yourselves after an implosion, you have to get several little benchmarks along the way. So Sparty's first 2 games against MAC teams looked the way they used to look when they were good. Balanced offense. Defensive stats looked good. Now they get a bye. They're going to catch Notre Dame coming off a second consecutive road game when they come to East Lansing next week. That's a must-win, I think, for Michigan State. If they get that win, then I think it's uh-oh. But if they get that loss with Iowa, who's next in my Big Ten power ratings, who plays a very physical brand of football coming in next, you could see them slide again. Akram Wadley looks like Ronnie Harmon back there for the Hawkeyes. Catching, throwing, breaking tackles, making guys miss in the open field. There's a little back-in-the-day reference for you, by the way, Big Ten fans. And Nathan Stanley, new quarterback for Iowa, off to a hot start. Already has 8 touchdown passes in his first 2 college games. Didn't the Big Ten crew tell us back in August that the quarterback spot at Iowa was looking really iffy? Yo, if you're a Hawkeye fan, you'll take this as iffy. This looks like Chuck Long 85. Doesn't look iffy, but it's only 2 games. We'll see what happens when we play a little bit more physical defense if you're an Iowa Hawkeye fan. Next up in my Big Ten power ratings, Maryland at number 5, averaging over 50 points a game so far with freshman quarterbacks. And yeah, I know last week was Towson, but when you're a Big Ten team and you're supposed to be good, you know what you should do against Towson? Put up 60 on them. That's what Maryland did, because that's what Maryland does, crab cakes and football. Next, number 4 in my Big Ten power ratings, Wisconsin. Another key injury on defense, but Jonathan Taylor, that freshman running back. Now, this is when the BTN crew got right. They were raving about him in camp. Had over 200 yards last week. Chris Warren, the transfer from Pitt, went over 100 yards as well. So Wisconsin has the running game going, but be very leery of that game against BYU this week. And I know BYU is 1-2. That's why I'd be leery. That is a proud program with a lot of tradition. Wounded animal. That looks like the game Michigan played at Iowa last year to me. Iowa coming off an embarrassing loss where Penn State just housed them, depanted them. That's a proud program. That's a coach that Kirk Ferentz won a lot of games. You had to know with a national spotlight, Iowa was going to bowl up. Okay, they were going to show some pride. BYU will play with some pride this week. If I were Wisconsin, I would do what Michigan did not do to Iowa last year. Get up early, like 14-0. Because that's when the Daubers get down. And that's when you can snowball. But if you let them hang around, eventually that pride and emotion, resourceful programs with a lot of tradition like that will find a way. So Wisconsin, get off to a good start on Saturday night. 3 in my Big Ten power ratings is Ohio State. Its worst home loss since 1999. JT Barrett again looks lost. Now, I want to say something about this, okay? So, in honor of Michigan Monday on the Ozone, which is a neat feature they've done for years, getting Ohio State's perspective of Michigan, I'm going to do something I don't think I've ever done in my entire life and give the Buckeyes some sincere advice. You're having the wrong argument. The problem is not your passing game. You're not running the ball enough. 16 tailback runs the whole game against Oklahoma. You should have had that in the first half, especially when you're averaging 5 yards a crack. Asking JT Barrett to throw the ball as much as Baker Mayfield? No way. You're asking him to do what he's not built to do. He is what he is. Put him in positions to succeed. Run the ball more. The problem isn't your passing game. It's the running game. You're not running the ball more. Thank you. You'll take my advice. You'll thank me later. Number 2 on my Big Ten power ratings is Michigan. Another dominant defensive performance. Another sloppy offensive effort. We already talked enough about that, though. Which brings me to number 1, Penn State. And I'm going to give them this spot. They will now hold this spot as the defending champions until somebody takes it from them. So Penn State's number 1 on my Big Ten power ratings. Quickly, let's go through if I had to vote in the AP poll. This would be my top 25. Washington State with a crazy comeback against Boise State. Stanford falls after getting physically dominated. Not just beaten, but physically dominated by USC. K-State still hasn't played anybody yet. TCU went in and did their best to get Brett Bielema fired in Fayetteville, Arkansas. UCLA, number 21. Georgia Tech at number 20. West Virginia, Will Grier lighting it up at number 19. Tennessee, big game on the road at Florida this week. Florida with 2 weeks off. You know they're chomping at the bit. The Vols, though, at 18. Auburn drops to 17 after a Brady Hoke era-esque offensive line performance. That offensive line performance by Auburn against Clemson reminded me of the last year for Brady Hoke against Sparty. Remember that? With Devin Gardner running for his life. At the end of the game, Devin Gardner just ran out of bounds rather than taking another hit. That's what Jared Stidham looked like with Auburn's offensive line against Clemson on Saturday. Let's continue the countdown. Now we get to the top 15 teams. I've got South Carolina, 2 nice FBS wins. Power 5 wins away from home now. North Carolina State and Missouri. Washington at 14 because they haven't played anybody, guys. Wisconsin at 13. LSU at 12. Florida State at 11. Virginia Tech I have ranked number 10. Ohio State I've dropped to number 9. Oklahoma State at number 8. Penn State at number 7, Michigan at number 6. Now, Steve, how do you have Michigan ranked higher than Penn State? Well, because I think Florida is going to prove to be better than anybody that Penn State has beaten thus far. So there's a difference between my Big Ten power ratings and where I would rank them in the poll, but you can see there's only one spot there, which means if Penn State's quarterback is better and they're playing at home, I think Penn State right now would win that game. Which brings us to the top 5. USC is at number 5. Georgia is at number 4 after a nice win against Notre Dame, but also a nice win against Appalachian State. I think those are 2 really good non-conference wins. And then the top 3 in my poll, if I had a vote in the AP this week, Clemson at number 3, Oklahoma at number 2, and Alabama remains number 1. More in a moment. Back here on Michigan Podcast with this week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, are you worried about Michigan's offense? 48% of you said yes, 17% said no, 35% of you gave the answer that I would have given. Give it some time. Patience. Be concerned, yes. But patience. Got a coach with a track record. This week's question of the week comes from O.D. Harris1 on Twitter. He wants to know, do you think U of M fans care about the way our team played now that Bucknut went down? I hope that's not true. I really do. No. No, we don't do that. Lesser teams get off on the misfortunes of others. Teams that are beneath us do that. You know, teams coached by John Cooper in the 1990s. We don't do that at Michigan. In fact, it doesn't really help Michigan at all that Ohio State lost. Makes the Big Ten look bad. They were the flag bearer, the standard bearer. Kind of hurts the conference's overall perception in a college football playoff era where you're splitting hairs and comparing strength of schedules and strength of conferences. It would have been better for us if Ohio State had won that game. Not to mention, I'd like to beat them in our house in November with them undefeated. Now we don't get to do that. So no, I don't think that really does anything for Michigan at all. In fact, I think cheering that on makes us look petty, small, immature, like our team's not good enough, so we have to get by on the kindness of strangers. You know, that's Rich Rodriguez era stuff, guys. We don't have to do that stuff anymore. So our number 1 concern should be our own team. Our number 2 concern should be our own team. And our number 3 concern, stay with me now, wait for it, should be our own team. If you like this week's episode of Michigan Podcast, don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher right here on YouTube, as well as share the link. Don't forget to support us on Patreon. You'll get my pick for this week's Michigan game, as well as the other top games in college football, as well as my instant reaction podcast immediately after Michigan's victory, I think, against Air Force this week. That'll do it for this week. Go Blue.